The clink of crystal glasses echoed across the opulent hall, a sound meant to signify camaraderie. Yet in that moment, it carried a tension sharper than any battlefield. General Georges Patton, iron-willed and unyielding, fixed his piercing gaze on the Russian general who had risen to offer a toast. The gesture was meant to bridge alliances, but Patton, ever the master of psychological warfare, saw the subtle calculations behind every smile, every bow. He didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. And when he finally spoke, the room held its collective breath. Words, Patton knew, could wound as decisively as a shell, and tonight, his words would leave an impression that no cannon could replicate. The toast began with pleasantries, the Russian general's voice smooth, practiced as if diplomacy were a game of chess. But Patton was not a man to be played. With measured poise and a cold glint in his eye, he let the silence stretch, letting the tension settle like a storm cloud over the gathering. When he finally remarked, it was not just a reply, it was a declaration, a subtle assertion of dominance that left everyone questioning who truly commanded the room. In those fleeting seconds, history paused. Not in battles, not in strategies, but in the quiet collision of wills, the clash of two titans in a room where no gunfire was heard. Here, diplomacy met audacity, and Patton's voice would echo far beyond the walls of that gilded hall. The war had left Europe scarred, cities reduced to rubble, the air still heavy with the ghosts of battles fought just days before. Soldiers trudged through mud and debris, boots worn thin, faces hardened by hardship. Yet amid this devastation, generals and diplomats maneuvered as carefully as armies on a battlefield. Strategy was not always laid out on maps. Sometimes it unfolded across dinner tables and banquet halls, where a misstep in words could tip the balance of an alliance. General Georges Patton understood this intimately. Known for his ferocity in combat and his strict discipline, he was also a man acutely aware of the psychological theater that accompanied diplomacy. He had spent decades mastering the art of command, but he knew that winning a war often required more than tanks, artillery, or troops. It required perception, presence, and the ability to project strength at every turn. And here, in this grand hall in a city still scarred by war, he faced a test unlike any battlefield. A carefully orchestrated toast by a Russian general whose reputation for cunning was as formidable as Patton's own for decisiveness. The Russian general, tall and imposing, lifted his crystal glass with a practiced elegance. Every gesture seemed calculated, designed to convey respect while subtly asserting superiority. The room filled with a quiet murmur of attendants and aides, the low hum of expectation. For the untrained observer, it was a simple act of courtesy. But Patton recognized the layers beneath the surface. This was a power play disguised as goodwill, a chance to measure the American general's reactions and perhaps unsettle him. Patton, seated with a straight-backed posture that seemed to radiate authority, observed quietly. He felt the weight of history pressing against him. He thought of the thousands of men who had followed his orders across deserts, rivers, and forests. He thought of the immense cost of the war and the fragile alliances that held it together. And he understood that tonight, one remark could resonate far beyond the gilded walls of the banquet hall. The Russian's words began, a rehearsed combination of flattery and political subtlety, designed to honor the American contribution while simultaneously reminding everyone of the Soviet Union's rising influence. The toast itself was polite, almost ceremonious, but it carried an edge of insinuation. It was the kind of remark that might slip past less discerning officers, but Patton sensed it immediately. Silence followed, deliberate, as if he were weighing the moment. Then he spoke. His words were precise, delivered with the cold clarity that had earned him both respect and fear throughout his military career. He did not stumble, he did not hedge, and he did not allow the Russian general's carefully constructed facade to dictate the tone. In that instant, Patton transformed the room from one of subtle competition into a stage for his own mastery of influence. Patton's response was not merely a counter to the toast. It was a statement of identity, of unflinching confidence in his own nation's contributions, and of personal authority. It revealed the man behind the uniform, a strategist who understood the intricate dance of power, whether on the battlefield or in diplomacy. Each syllable resonated with intention, the cadence of a voice trained to command attention, and every pause reinforced his dominance without the need for aggression. The Russian general, momentarily caught off guard, maintained his composure, though Patton's words had disrupted the carefully balanced script of the evening. The room, filled with aides, officers, and observers, remained tense, aware that a confrontation of intellect and will had just occurred. In that brief encounter, Patton demonstrated an ability that few possessed, to wield language as effectively as a saber, to shape perception without raising a hand, and to leave an impression that lingered far beyond the moment. Beyond the immediate exchange, the toast symbolized something larger. It was a microcosm of the global tension simmering at the close of the war, a reminder that alliances were fragile, that power could shift with a single word, and that diplomacy required both subtlety and steel. Patton's approach reflected his understanding of these dynamics. He recognized that victory was not just measured in captured territory or defeated armies, but also in the ability to command respect, shape perception, and assert strength in every encounter. Patton's remark did more than address a single toast. It asserted a philosophy that guided his entire career. He believed that hesitation was weakness, that clarity and decisiveness commanded respect, and that a leader's presence could alter outcomes as surely as any battlefield maneuver. In this encounter, these principles were on full display. Every gesture, every word, every measured silence was part of a deliberate strategy to project dominance while maintaining the veneer of civility. The atmosphere in the hall remained taut, the invisible threads of power and influence stretched to their limit. Observers watched as two men, both commanding immense respect and wielding formidable intellect, engaged in a battle without weapons. The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with anticipation, as Patton's words echoed in the minds of those present. This was not merely a toast, it was a lesson in leadership, a demonstration of psychological acuity, and a subtle warning about the consequences of underestimating a man like Patton. History remembers generals for their victories, their battles, and their campaigns, but moments like this reveal the layers beneath the surface. They show the interplay between strength and subtlety, between action and perception. Patton's response to the Russian general's toast was not just a single sentence. It was a statement that encapsulated his understanding of power, strategy, and human nature. It demonstrated that leadership extends beyond orders and formations. It resides in the ability to read, respond, and dominate in every context, even one as seemingly trivial as a ceremonial toast. By the time the glasses were set down, the room had changed. The dynamics of influence had shifted subtly but irrevocably. Patton had asserted control without raising his voice, without resorting to force, and without breaking the decorum of the evening. He had turned a moment designed to flatter into a demonstration of intellect, confidence, and authority. For those present, it was a revelation that true leadership encompasses far more than tactics. It is the careful orchestration of presence, perception, and principle. The banquet hall itself was a testament to both history and power. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fire above polished wooden floors, reflecting the flickering candlelight in delicate patterns. Paintings of military triumphs and national leaders adorned the walls, silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. Yet the grandeur of the room could not hide the undercurrents of tension that ran through the evening. Here, amid luxury and ceremony, the realities of a world reshaped by war were impossible to ignore. The Russian general, a career officer shaped by decades of rigid hierarchy and statecraft, had meticulously prepared for this moment. He knew Patton's reputation, a man as feared for his audacity as he was admired for his military genius. He had studied reports, memorized anecdotes, and rehearsed the nuances of diplomacy. The toast he offered was designed to acknowledge the contributions of the Allies while subtly signaling the Soviet Union's ascendancy, a reminder that the post-war world would be a contest of influence as much as ideology. Patton, however, was unconcerned with theatrics or rehearsed gestures. His experience on battlefields from North Africa to France had taught him to read the smallest signals of intent. He could gauge morale with a glance, detect hesitation in the body language of his subordinates, and recognize duplicity in an opponent's politeness. In this room, filled with generals, aides, and observers from multiple nations, he treated the toast as yet another strategic engagement, albeit one played with words rather than artillery. The context of the post-war world weighed heavily on him. Europe was in ruins, and the Allied powers were already beginning the delicate dance of occupation, reconstruction, and influence. The Soviet Union's rapid advances in Eastern Europe had been met with both admiration and anxiety in the West. Patton understood that the decisions made in moments like these, whether during formal negotiations, casual interactions, or even ceremonial toasts, could ripple through history. He knew that the wrong word, the slightest misjudgment, could embolden adversaries or unsettle allies. As he considered this, Patton's mind drew upon decades of observation and experience. Leadership, he believed, was as much about psychology as logistics. The ability to assert oneself, to communicate unwavering confidence, and to command respect without aggression, was a skill honed over a lifetime. His remark to the Russian general was carefully calculated, not an act of vanity, but a deliberate strategy designed to establish authority while maintaining the appearance of diplomacy. The words he chose were precise, reflecting both intellect and temperament. He could have resorted to charm, flattery, or evasive politeness. Many generals might have, seeking to avoid confrontation in the delicate post-war climate. But Patton's philosophy was different. He understood that true leadership required courage, not only on the battlefield but also in every interaction that carried weight. By responding with clarity and intent, he communicated more than mere words. He conveyed his comprehension of strategy, his understanding of alliances, and his unyielding confidence in both his own position and that of his nation. Observers of the scene were struck not only by the content of his remark but also by the manner in which it was delivered. Patton's presence was magnetic. He did not raise his voice, yet every syllable seemed amplified by authority. He did not gesture excessively, yet each movement carried weight. Even in the stillness between words, he exerted control over the room. In that moment, the banquet hall was transformed into a theater of command, where influence was measured not in troops or tanks but in presence, perception, and principle. The Russian general, trained to navigate the subtleties of diplomacy and military hierarchy, recognized the challenge immediately. He maintained a composed exterior, but Patton's remark disrupted the anticipated flow of the evening. In subtle ways, the balance of power had shifted. While the toast had been intended to assert Soviet influence, Patton had transformed it into an assertion of his own authority. This was not confrontation for its own sake. It was an illustration of strategic acumen, a lesson in the interplay of diplomacy, psychology, and leadership. Patton's approach reflected a broader philosophy that had guided his career. He believed that hesitation or uncertainty was dangerous, that clarity of purpose inspired loyalty and respect, and that perception could be as influential as action. Throughout his campaigns, he had applied these principles relentlessly. In North Africa, his decisive maneuvers had turned the tide of battles. In Europe, his audacity had often caught enemies off guard. Here, at a ceremonial toast, the same principles were at work. The medium had changed, words instead of tanks, but the strategy remained consistent. Assert dominance, maintain clarity, and ensure that others understood both your intent and capability. The encounter also highlighted the subtleties of international relations in the immediate post-war period. The Soviet Union, emerging from immense sacrifice and victory, sought to expand its influence across Eastern Europe. The United States, having endured tremendous loss and contributed decisively to the defeat of Nazi Germany, aimed to establish a balance of power favorable to democratic governance and free markets. Within this context, the toast was more than ceremonial. It was a microcosm of the global chessboard, a demonstration of the tensions, ambitions, and delicate negotiations that would define the coming decades. Patton's remark, while succinct, carried layers of meaning. It acknowledged the toast without yielding ground, respecting the formality of the occasion while asserting his own authority. It demonstrated comprehension of geopolitical realities without resorting to rhetoric or confrontation. It conveyed strength, intelligence, and discernment, the qualities that had made him a formidable general and a figure of lasting influence. Those present, both allies and observers from other nations, recognized the significance of what had occurred. In the aftermath, stories circulated of the exchange, emphasizing not only Patton's courage but also his strategic brilliance. It was a lesson in leadership that transcended the battlefield, that power could be exercised quietly yet decisively, that influence could be asserted through intellect and presence, and that even in moments of ceremony, history could be shaped by a single, well-chosen remark. Patton's remark also reflected his personal philosophy regarding honor, respect, and the psychology of command. He understood that leaders were judged not only by victories but by their comportment in every arena where influence was at stake. By maintaining composure, demonstrating clarity of thought, and asserting authority with precision, he reinforced his reputation as a leader who was both fearless and disciplined. This approach earned him loyalty, commanded respect, and ensured that his presence would be felt long after the words had been spoken. In the broader sweep of history, such moments illustrate the interplay between character, circumstance, and consequence. While battles and treaties dominate textbooks, encounters like the toast between Patton and the Russian general reveal the human dimension of strategy. They demonstrate that leadership requires not only courage and intellect but also the ability to navigate subtle social dynamics, interpret intent, and respond with clarity and confidence. Patton's words, though brief, encapsulated these principles, leaving an imprint on all who witnessed them and on the historical record that would follow. The event also highlighted the role of perception in leadership. Patton knew that authority was not granted, it was projected and reinforced through action, demeanor, and language. In the post-war context, where alliances were delicate and tension simmered beneath the surface, perception often mattered as much as material capability. By responding with poise and decisiveness, he demonstrated the qualities that define not only military command but also effective statesmanship, foresight, judgment, and the ability to shape the narrative in one's favor. As the evening continued, the atmosphere shifted subtly. The initial expectation of a ceremonial toast had given way to a demonstration of strategic intellect. Conversations, once polite and measured, now carried a new awareness of the dynamics in play. Patton's presence had altered the room's equilibrium, reminding all present that leadership extended beyond orders and reports, reaching into the realm of influence, perception, and psychological acuity. By the conclusion of the toast, the Russian general had regained composure, but the unspoken recognition of Patton's skill lingered. It was a moment of quiet respect, an acknowledgement of a man who understood both the overt and subtle dimensions of power. Patton's words, delivered with precision and authority, had reshaped the interaction from a simple ceremonial gesture into a nuanced demonstration of leadership, intellect, and strategic foresight. The conversation did not end with the clinking of glasses. Even after the formal toast concluded, the energy in the room remained charged. The subtle exchange had not gone unnoticed. Observers, both American and Soviet, sensed that something remarkable had transpired. What had appeared to be a routine diplomatic gesture had become a display of strategic acumen, the kind that Patton had practiced all his life. In that brief moment, he had asserted control, projected authority, and demonstrated the rare combination of intelligence and instinct that defined his command style. Patton's ability to influence without overt force reflected the lessons of his military career. On the battlefields of North Africa, Sicily, and France, he had understood that psychological dominance could be as decisive as physical engagement. Soldiers and adversaries alike had learned that hesitation in Patton's presence could be costly. The toast offered by the Russian general was, in its own way, another battlefield. The stakes were different, words rather than artillery, but the principle remained. The perception of strength often determined outcomes. The Russian general, a man steeped in the traditions of the Soviet military hierarchy, realized that he was facing a leader who operated on multiple planes simultaneously. Patton's remark had done more than respond to politeness. It had signaled comprehension, confidence, and command. In subtle ways, it reframed the balance of influence. While the Soviet general had intended to assert presence through ceremony, Patton turned that assertion into a shared stage where his own authority could be acknowledged without overt confrontation. This encounter also illuminates the human dimension of leadership. Patton understood that influence was not granted by rank alone. It was cultivated through demeanor, intelligence, and the ability to anticipate the responses of others. In every word he spoke, in every measured pause, he demonstrated a mastery of situational awareness. Leadership, in Patton's philosophy, was about reading the room, understanding motives, and projecting certainty. These skills were as crucial in diplomacy as in combat, and this banquet hall was their perfect proving ground. The toast, while ceremonial, mirrored the broader post-war tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. The alliance that had defeated Nazi Germany was tenuous, held together by necessity rather than shared ideology. Each side watched the other with suspicion, seeking to assert influence in a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. Within this context, every interaction, no matter how small, was a reflection of strategic positioning. Patton's remark demonstrated an acute awareness of these dynamics. He recognized that diplomacy, like battle, was about timing, perception, and the judicious use of influence. Even the smallest details mattered. The tilt of a head, the weight of a gaze, the deliberate pacing of speech, all contributed to the larger impression of authority. Patton's remark was a masterclass in leveraging these subtleties. It acknowledged the Russian general's position without yielding dominance, balancing respect with assertiveness. Observers recognized that he had turned a formal toast into a demonstration of presence, leaving an indelible impression on everyone in attendance. Beyond the immediate participants, the incident also offers insight into Patton's broader philosophy of leadership. He believed that hesitation or ambiguity could be dangerous, that clarity and decisiveness inspired confidence, and that perception was a form of power in itself. His military campaigns had reinforced this belief repeatedly. Commanders who faltered in resolve risked not only defeat but also the erosion of trust and morale among their own forces. By extension, Patton understood that these principles applied to diplomacy as well. The subtlety of the exchange is worth noting. Patton did not berate the Russian general, nor did he flaunt his own achievements. He simply used language as a tool, a precise instrument that conveyed both intelligence and authority. His words were crafted to leave no doubt about his comprehension of the broader stakes, yet they respected the decorum of the occasion. This balance, assertive yet measured, exemplifies a rare form of strategic mastery that transcends military tactics. In the hours that followed, aides and diplomats reflected on the encounter. The remark had shifted perceptions subtly but decisively. Patton's presence and intellect were undeniable, and even those unfamiliar with the intricacies of his military career recognized the gravity of the moment. What had begun as a ceremonial gesture had become a lesson in influence, leadership, and the power of measured communication. It is also essential to understand the personal dimension of Patton's conduct. He was a man of intensity, driven by a belief in honor, discipline, and excellence. His response was not merely tactical, it was deeply personal, reflecting his commitment to principles he held sacrosanct. To Patton, leadership demanded authenticity. To equivocate or defer in moments of significance was a betrayal of one's responsibility. In this sense, the toast was not just a diplomatic exchange, but an affirmation of the values that guided his life and career. Furthermore, the encounter illustrates the intersection of culture, personality, and historical circumstance. The Russian general represented a system and worldview that differed sharply from Patton's own. Navigating these differences required not only intellect but sensitivity, an ability to recognize intent without being manipulated by it. Patton's remark demonstrated this skill. He engaged without capitulating, acknowledged without conceding, and projected authority without aggression. It was a delicate balance, achieved through a combination of instinct, experience, and strategic insight. The psychological impact of such interactions should not be underestimated. In post-war Europe, where alliances were fragile and the balance of power was in flux, moments of perception could resonate for years. Patton's ability to assert authority through words, presence, and demeanor served as a form of soft power, influencing not only those present in the room but also the broader perceptions of American leadership. In a subtle yet profound way, he demonstrated that influence extends beyond formal negotiation. It exists in the nuances of interaction, in the command of attention and respect. The anecdote also underscores the timeless principles of leadership that Patton embodied. Courage, decisiveness, strategic awareness, and psychological acuity were not confined to the battlefield, they were applicable wherever influence and authority mattered. By asserting control in a moment of ceremonial diplomacy, Patton reinforced these principles, leaving a blueprint for others who sought to lead with intelligence and integrity. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere gradually normalized, but the subtle shift in perception remained. The room had witnessed a demonstration of leadership that combined intellect, courage, and strategic subtlety. Patton's remark had served multiple purposes. It acknowledged the ceremonial intent of the toast, asserted his authority, and projected a vision of American resolve in a world poised for reconstruction and potential conflict. Each observer, whether ally or rival, left the room with a nuanced understanding of his capabilities and character. Ultimately, this encounter was more than a single moment of verbal exchange. It symbolized the convergence of personal philosophy, historical circumstance, and strategic insight. Patton's response encapsulated the qualities that had defined his military career: decisiveness, perceptiveness, and the ability to assert authority without unnecessary confrontation. It demonstrated that leadership is multidimensional, encompassing not only the tactical and strategic but also the psychological and perceptual realms. History often remembers generals for battles won and campaigns executed. Yet moments like the toast between Patton and the Russian general reveal the subtler dimensions of influence. They show how perception, presence, and strategic communication can shape outcomes as profoundly as any military maneuver. Patton's remark, though brief, resonated far beyond the hall, illustrating that the art of leadership requires mastery of both action and interaction, courage and subtlety, intellect and instinct. By the time the evening ended, the narrative had shifted. What was intended as a simple gesture of goodwill had become a study in authority, respect, and the careful orchestration of influence. Patton had demonstrated that leadership is not confined to the battlefield, but exists wherever decisions, perceptions, and interactions converge. In this sense, the toast became a defining anecdote, emblematic of his approach to command, diplomacy, and the enduring principles that guided his life. The banquet hall grew quieter as the evening drew to a close, but the impact of the exchange lingered like smoke after a fire. Patton's remark had done more than respond to a ceremonial gesture. It had altered the tone of the room, shifted perceptions, and subtly demonstrated the power of presence, intellect, and confidence. Even as the guests resumed their conversations, a collective awareness remained. In the presence of Patton, ordinary ceremonies became arenas for mastery. This moment, seemingly small in the grand sweep of history, epitomized the qualities that had made Patton a figure of enduring fascination. Courage, decisiveness, and clarity of purpose had long defined him on battlefields from North Africa to the Rhine. But the toast revealed another dimension: the capacity to wield intellect and perception as weapons, to dominate a room without raising a voice, and to assert authority in circumstances far removed from combat. In a world still recovering from the devastation of war, such skill was as necessary as any military maneuver. History remembers the wars Patton fought, the campaigns he led, and the victories he claimed. But moments like this remind us that leadership transcends statistics and strategy. It resides in the capacity to influence, to inspire, and to assert presence in every context where authority matters. Patton's remark to the Russian general was a crystallization of these principles, a demonstration that mastery is not only about action but also about timing, perception, and the subtle orchestration of human dynamics. The Russian general, though trained in the intricacies of military diplomacy, had been momentarily unseated by Patton's precision. His carefully prepared toast, intended to assert the stature of the Soviet Union, had been transformed into a platform for Patton's own authority. In subtle ways, the exchange symbolized the broader post-war tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union, two superpowers navigating a fragile alliance, aware that influence could be gained or lost in moments of perception. Patton's ability to navigate this landscape was rooted in a lifetime of experience, both on and off the battlefield. He understood that leadership was as much about perception as power, that respect was earned through decisiveness and intellect, and that influence could be exerted without confrontation. These principles, honed over decades of command, were evident in the way he conducted himself during the toast. Every word, pause, and gesture was deliberate, carefully calibrated to assert authority while maintaining decorum. The banquet hall itself became a stage for this subtle display of mastery. Chandeliers glimmered above, casting fractured light on the polished floors and ornate walls. Every observer, whether ally or rival, could sense the shift in dynamics. Patton's presence had reshaped the room, turning what might have been a routine ceremony into a demonstration of psychological and strategic skill. The nuances of human interaction, often overlooked in discussions of power and history, had been brought to the forefront. Leadership, Patton demonstrated, is as much about intellect as it is about action. On the battlefield, he had learned that hesitation could be fatal, that clarity of purpose inspired loyalty, and that perception often dictated outcomes. At the banquet, these same principles were at work. By responding to the Russian general with precision and confidence, he reinforced his own authority, commanded respect, and subtly reshaped the narrative of the evening. This exchange also highlights the timeless lessons of diplomacy. Alliances, particularly those forged in the crucible of conflict, are delicate. Subtle gestures, words, and behaviors carry weight far beyond their immediate context. Patton's remark was a demonstration of this reality. It respected the formalities of diplomacy while asserting strength, intelligence, and command. It was a reminder that leadership extends beyond the battlefield, reaching into every interaction where influence and perception intersect. Moreover, the encounter reveals the depth of Patton's understanding of human nature. He recognized that individuals, even those trained in strategy and discipline, are influenced by confidence, presence, and decisiveness. By projecting unwavering authority, he shifted the balance of the room, commanding attention and respect without aggression. This mastery of human dynamics, combined with strategic intelligence, underscores why Patton remains an enduring figure in military history. The broader implications of the toast extend into the realm of historical narrative. While battles and campaigns are often chronicled in textbooks, moments like this illuminate the subtler forces at work in shaping events. Leadership is not only exercised through orders and victories but also through perception, interaction, and influence. Patton's remark exemplifies these principles, demonstrating that decisive action can take many forms, sometimes in tanks, sometimes in words, and sometimes in the silent assertion of presence. Even decades later, the story resonates. Scholars, military historians, and leadership experts analyze the incident as a case study in psychological acumen, strategic perception, and the nuanced exercise of authority. Patton's capacity to assert dominance without confrontation provides lessons not only for military professionals but for anyone seeking to understand the dynamics of influence, negotiation, and leadership. The anecdote also reflects Patton's personal philosophy, which blended honor, discipline, and courage with an understanding of the subtleties of power. He believed that leadership required authenticity, decisiveness, and clarity of purpose. Hesitation or equivocation was unacceptable. Confidence and perception were as essential as strategy and logistics. In the context of the toast, these principles were evident in every word and gesture, reinforcing the idea that true mastery encompasses both action and interaction. Patton's life offers countless examples of this approach. Whether leading troops through the deserts of North Africa, executing bold maneuvers in Europe, or navigating delicate post-war interactions, he consistently demonstrated the ability to combine intellect, presence, and decisiveness. The toast was merely one illustration of a broader pattern. A man who understood that influence is multidimensional, that leadership requires awareness of both overt and subtle forces, and that authority is projected through a combination of action, perception, and communication. In the context of the post-war world, the stakes of such interactions were immense. The United States and the Soviet Union, former allies, were beginning to navigate the complexities of a new global order. Every gesture, every word, every interaction carried implications that could resonate far beyond the moment. Patton's remark was not a casual quip. It was a carefully measured act that reflected his comprehension of these dynamics and his ability to assert influence within them. The psychological mastery demonstrated in this moment is instructive. Patton did not rely on intimidation or arrogance. He relied on observation, calculation, and the projection of certainty. He understood that leadership is not only exercised through command but also through perception, and that influence often depends on the ability to control the narrative of a situation. In this regard, the toast serves as a timeless lesson in strategic communication and authority. The Russian general, despite his experience and preparation, was confronted with a man whose combination of intellect, presence, and decisiveness was unmatched in that room. Patton's ability to engage without capitulating, to assert without aggression, and to command respect through clarity and authority left an indelible impression. The toast had become a demonstration of mastery, a reminder that leadership is exercised not only through action but through the careful orchestration of perception and influence. By the end of the evening, the significance of the moment was apparent to all present. The room had witnessed not a confrontation, but a demonstration of strategic brilliance and psychological acuity. Patton's remark exemplified the principles that guided his career: courage, decisiveness, clarity, and mastery of human dynamics. It was a microcosm of the qualities that had allowed him to lead with distinction and influence events far beyond his immediate control. The lasting impact of this encounter lies in its subtlety. Unlike a battlefield engagement, the effects were quiet but profound. Perceptions had shifted, authority had been asserted, and influence had been exercised in a manner that left no overt mark but a deep, enduring impression. It is in such moments that the true dimensions of leadership reveal themselves, through understanding, presence, and the precise application of intellect and judgment. As history reflects upon Patton, the anecdote of the toast endures not merely as a curiosity, but as a testament to the art of leadership itself. It demonstrates that true authority transcends rank or position, that influence can be wielded with precision and subtlety, and that the qualities of courage, clarity, and perception are as vital in diplomacy as they are in war. Even now, decades later, the story resonates with lessons that extend far beyond the historical context. Leaders across disciplines, military, political, and corporate, study Patton's approach to understand the interplay of perception, influence, and authority. His ability to assert control without confrontation, to project confidence through intellect and presence, and to shape interactions with precision, remains a benchmark for effective leadership. In reflecting upon the toast, one is reminded of the enduring truth that leadership is multidimensional. It requires decisiveness, strategic awareness, and psychological acuity. It demands courage, clarity, and the ability to influence without overt force. Patton's remark to the Russian general encapsulated these principles, leaving a legacy that continues to instruct, inspire, and challenge. And so, the memory of that evening endures, a moment in time where history paused, not in the roar of artillery but in the measured cadence of words, where power was demonstrated not through aggression but through intellect, and where one man, standing firm in clarity and confidence, left an imprint far beyond the walls of a gilded hall. Patton's remark was more than a response to a toast. It was a declaration of mastery, a study in leadership, and a testament to the enduring power of presence, perception, and principle. In that room, at that moment, he demonstrated that influence is exercised not only through action but through the careful orchestration of words, gestures, and awareness. It is a lesson as relevant today as it was then, a reminder that leadership is not only about victory, but about the character, intellect, and presence that command respect wherever authority is required. The clinking of glasses may have faded, and the formalities of the evening may have concluded, but the resonance of Patton's remark continues. It echoes through history as a subtle yet profound demonstration of how a single act, executed with clarity and confidence, can shape perception, influence outcomes, and leave an enduring mark on those who witness it. In the end, the toast was more than ceremony, it was leadership distilled, a moment that embodies the essence of George S. Patton.